Smartphones really don't belong
Oh,
in
no.
schools. You almost don't want to disclose because you don't want to make somebody upset.
It seems like parents have to get educated as much as the students. Hey, Peter, good morning. Welcome back.
Hey, good morning, David, or I could say good afternoon, actually, but welcome back. Welcome back to our Call Me Data podcast. And today we have a very special guest.
Yes, Dr. Aviva Legatt is joining us. So, Aviva, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Yeah. So we're really excited about this conversation. We've met previously and we had some great conversations amongst the three of us about one of our favorite topics, which is the impact of AI in education. But why don't we start by just asking you to maybe give us a little more fulsome introduction of what you do and your participation in the world of AI when it comes to education.
Sure. Let me tee up that question by introducing myself, and I'll share how I got to here. So my background is in the field of higher education. I started my career at University of Pennsylvania right here in Philly. I know we have Philly people here, which is great. And there I worked in admissions for the Wharton School, and I had a real passion for college admissions, not only because I worked in it, but when I was younger, I grew up in Princeton, which is sort of like the hub of pressure when it comes to admissions, right? So I put too much pressure on myself. I had a very challenging time with my own process. So for me, it was very meaningful to start a business that supported students' families with the college admissions process. And I had that business for over 10 years. And then with the advent of AI, I realized very quickly that this was going to drive the future of education, the future of work. And I wanted to double down on my own education in that regard. So, I didn't need any more doctorates, but I did want to get a practical education on how to build with AI, the implications of AI in education. And I've been writing a lot about AI adoption in education, mostly for Forbes. And I've been covering different developments in the field with the goal of helping others to benefit from this knowledge, because when I speak with university and school leaders, everyone is pretty much flying blind. And I feel like I can help give them that compass and that roadmap. That's very rewarding for me, because this is a huge, complex world that we are in now, and the ground is literally shifting from under folks as they're trying
Yes.
to get a sense of it. So that's what I've been doing. So I founded this company called generative, and what we're mainly focused on is AI adoption strategy for education specifically. So that could be policy guidance, Fluency, as well as support with AI microcredentials, because there's a big push in education now for institutions to develop these microcredential programs that could get the students into the workforce and into careers faster and better. So that's what I've been working on, a little bit about me.
I love it. And those of you who've listened to Peter and I talk before about this know that we seem to veer off into talking about how education fits into the whole AI revolution all the time. So it's great to be able to talk to an expert in the field. I'm curious about one thing. You mentioned that you became aware of AI and you predicted this big impact on the educational field and you set out to learn. How did you do that? It sounds like you were effectively self-taught as you deciphered what was happening in the land of AI. What was that
Right.
like?
Well, I can't say I was completely self-taught. I think at first I did a lot of experimenting, and I noticed that the students I was working with were using it. And so when I started seeing them take those shortcuts, I was like, oh, what is this going to mean for the future? And I remember that I believe it was the month when ChatGPT was launched, there was an article that I think the title was "The College Essay is Dead." So of course that got my attention and got me thinking, right? Because that's what I was helping people with. Not just college essays. They were really more talking about school-based writing, school-based writing assessments and so on. But I was definitely digging into it, thinking about it, observing what my students were doing. And then I decided to take coursework on agent building and on responsible AI. And so it was really through learning how to build AI agents that I started to see the applications of AI to improve education. I wasn't just sort of swimming in like prompt engineering 101 self-taught, but just thinking about how I could use different data sources to support institutions. So for example, I've developed these tools like a college to career mapper, where institutions can give me data, or I can plug in publicly available data on their programs of study, workforce demand, and then if they're a community college, I can plug in the transfer information, and it'll show me very clearly what the data is and what are specific action steps that institutions can take. And colleges and universities have been finding this very, very helpful because they often struggle to sort of make sense of all the different data because the data is everywhere, but it's not streamlined. And so my agent that I've built really maps this. And then another agent I've built that's also been helpful to institutions is a governance toolkit. So what that does is it essentially maps the policies of an educational institution against standards and guidelines such as the NIST framework.
Interesting.
10-point system. And so it shows you where there might be policy gaps, and that helps with governance building, coalition building. So really, I think where the agentic applications have been hugely helpful for me in helping institutions is just it gives folks a really fast snapshot of where they could go, where they are, and where they could go. Because if they don't know where they are, they may not know a pathway forward. So it gives them a quick pathway to react to. It may not be the exact right answer that the agent is providing, but it's giving them something to react to, and it is grounding that in evidence. So that is a better place to start than just, well, what do we do now? And, what's next?
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, we got to do that workforce Pell thing. And like, oh yeah, our students are asking for this, but how do we make sense of it? So it was really gradual self-teaching and then formal learning about AI agents that led me to realize what I could do to help these institutions further.
Oh, that's fascinating, actually. I have a million questions. Quite honestly, I really don't know where to start. I can make this into a 12-hour podcast if you really want to know the truth. I know. David and I are passionate about this space. We talk about it constantly. And I think virtually even corporate meetings come up. We're always speaking about education. Even yesterday we were in a meeting and, one of the questions we got from a seasoned attorney was, what does this do for changes in education? It kind of came out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it. So I'm going to toss that question back to you. I think David and I see things fundamentally changing going forward. Maybe moving away from a traditional STEM education to more of a traditional classics-based education, which coming out of my mouth is odd, given that I'm an engineer. So I just would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, I think that there's sort of a push and pull there between where education could focus and develop. And I really think it's a combination of what you're saying, the classics, and then also this really pragmatic piece of these AI fluency skills, because these skills are not skills that are taught in most domains. And they are very needed. In fact, I know I reported this on Forbes recently. AI fluency is the #1 quality that employers are looking for, according to a Graduate Management Council survey. And so having that fluency and having that space to learn that in a structured way where you're learning about responsible usage, how do you pick a tool? How do you apply AI in a particular discipline? That's important. So I think it's really important for students to have a disciplinary background of some sort, whether that's science, classics, education, something, and then layer on the AI fluency, because AI on its own, it could be just a vacuum or just an infinite loop of everything. Whereas if you're applying it to a specific area that you're interested in, it's a lot more useful than if you're just learning how to build it with it, right? Because if you don't know why you're building something or what the purpose is, it's like kind of no point, right? So I really see I could envision a world in which the bachelor's degree becomes 3 years. There's a push for that now.
Interesting.
Some institutions have joined. I reported this. I think it's just called College of Three, very, very simply, and it's essentially a 90-credit bachelor's degree instead of a 120-credit bachelor's degree, so it can finish at 3 years versus 4, which is the norm in other countries. So I see a shorter bachelor's degree, and I see community colleges becoming more and more essential and needing to expand because these colleges can offer credentials fast that get students workforce ready. And I've been speaking with some universities also that are launching partnerships with companies, tech companies, to co-create these micro credentials as well. And so I see also more industry education partnerships developing in the future so that the talent pipeline there. I was actually just speaking with someone this morning from this company called Lightcast, and what they do is essentially they provide workforce data research reports for educational institutions. And what she was telling me was there's actually a large import of AI talent right now from other countries, that we're not getting the AI talent here. So we definitely have an AI
Why
talent
is
issue in this country that we need to rectify.
interesting? Why is that? That's not something I ever would have. I hadn't heard that before.
Yes, why is that happening? We didn't get into that in terms of the scope of our conversation, but I did find it very interesting. It might be that other countries have a more STEM focused education. It might be that there's more teaching. I know in China, they're starting AI education in kindergarten. That was something
Right.
I heard announced within the last year. I don't know as much about other countries, but that one I know has been in the news, right, in terms of having that early learning. And I'm not necessarily advocating that students should be learning AI in kindergarten. I don't think that's necessary to become AI fluent. In fact, I don't think it takes that long to become AI fluent. I could take, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months to become AI fluent. It's really not, doesn't need to be practiced that young, in my opinion. But the fact is that there are other countries apparently that are doing this more effectively than we are right now. And even if our race to develop more and more advanced AI, even if we win that, if we lose the talent war, then we're not going to be in a good position, right, as a country going forward with this AI driven world.
Totally makes sense. I like that you're talking about AI fluency too, because I think, the way I look at this, there's a number of different complementary, maybe overlapping skill sets, right? There's the set of deep technical and mathematical skills that are necessary to do AI research, to create new AI models and new AI capabilities. That's a very specific thing. And frankly, not something that the vast majority of college students will ever be exposed to, nor do they need to, right? Like, I think if anything, what generative AI has done in the last few years is it's made AI more accessible to normal people who don't have deep STEM backgrounds. But then you get into, I think a lot of people talk about AI literacy, and they're sort of talking often about that mechanical literacy, the knowledge on how to write a good prompt, or the knowledge on how to configure an agent or connect an MCP server, or, a bunch of somewhat technical skills, maybe not as technical as these AI researchers. But you were describing AI fluency, and I really like that, because to me that is the third level of the pyramid of knowledge, and it's sort of beyond the internal workings of the model. I think you mentioned things like, how to identify the right time and place to use the model, how to use it correctly, how to provide the right human in the loop oversight, how to select the right model, how to govern it safely and responsibly. Let's talk a little bit more about that fluency aspect, because that's the one that you, I'm curious whether you see people who are doing a lot of work on that from an educational perspective. I've never run across any institution that is embracing that yet. I'm seeing people teach, prompt engineering courses or other AI courses, but I'm not seeing that more holistic fluency
Right.
lens applied.
There are, there are just a few colleges in this country that are doing this really well. One that always comes to my mind, I feel like I should be their ambassador or something. It's Arizona State University. They have done a phenomenal job integrating AI throughout the discipline. So it's not just
Right.
AI is this, you can major in AI or you can take AI
Right.
courses through computer science. It's, how do we apply AI in each discipline? And they have different incubators for AI, yeah, AI innovations and so on. So they're, I would say, a model for the future that I hope other institutions will follow. And I know a lot of institutions I have spoke with are trying to follow their lead because they have done such a phenomenal job integrating it. But really, again, for me, people have asked me about the difference in like what is AI literacy and what is AI fluency. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there are a million definitions, but mine definition of AI literacy would be like, okay, I know how to open up ChatGPT or Gemini and I can type some things into it and get the information I'm looking for. That's AI literacy. AI fluency is knowing how to adapt your workflows and your life with AI. And this is like a really random application that maybe you all will appreciate. But I was reading this, and I haven't done this, but I was reading about somebody who was mourning the loss of their father. And what they're doing is they're putting together like text messages, voicemails to like recreate kind of an
Yeah, I've
avatar
seen
that he
those.
could talk to after, right? Like it was now that he's
Yeah,
gone and he's missing him, that's something. And I thought that was, I mean, to me, like I thought that was a beautiful way to stay connected with him, even though obviously it's not really him. But, we could all like theoretically, and without that much, people don't realize how easy it is to actually do this. We could theoretically do that with anyone. Like we could recreate an avatar of somebody and
right,
have I can assign them a personality or a set of things that they are going to do and actually create something like that, which is like creepy but also cool. So yeah, I think people don't realize how much easier their lives would be in a lot of ways if they could just think about like what are the things that you do every day that cause friction, whether it's making waiting on hold for the IRS, or wanting to talk with your relative who's
right.
no longer here. Like what are the things that you want to do? How can AI help you get there? And that's the fluency piece to me.
So, Aviva, I'm
Okay.
really curious. Like, I'm imagining my college professors, especially like my English professors, and I'm imagining trying to convince them that it was an appropriate thing to do to integrate AI into the curriculum. And I'm just imagining a lot of pushback, right? These are people in the liberal arts department who, at least when I was in school, it was hard to imagine that. So, how are you seeing faculty members react to this? Are they embracing the idea of deeply integrating AI into all of the curriculums, or is that a little bit of a battle that still needs to be fought sometimes?
That's a great question. I am personally not working with as many faculty. I work more with administrators who are working on policy and working on co-creating these programs. So any professors that I would be working with are more AI forward. However, I have been reporting and noting from others who have told me that certainly there is resistance, and also there are challenges with accreditation, competencies to kind of just change the curriculums overnight. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but when you have political will, it can happen quickly. But if you don't have political will, you have that resistance. And then,
Right.
meanwhile, if you're an administrator and you're kind of flying blind, it's a little bit harder to push through that resistance if you yourself aren't necessarily quite AI ready or AI fluent enough to explain why this is necessary or why it's important. And I'm not dogging any administrators here. I'm sure they're all trying their best, but I just think it's a
Right.
really hard problem when you have limited capacity for building AI on many campuses, and you have professors who are resistant. It might be because they're worried about losing their job. They could feel threatened because essentially this is knowledge on tap, whereas professors at colleges were sort of hubs of knowledge. And so that is sort of like inherently threatening. So I definitely understand the sentiment. So I really think it's about, having those leaders that can shepherd and facilitate those discussions to say, no, you're not being replaced, but we need to figure out how we can integrate AI fluency into this discipline, into this curriculum to align with what our students are wanting and needing, because 90% of students are using AI. So it's
Right.
happening. And so you have the opportunity to direct that, or you have the opportunity to ignore it. And so I think that hopefully professors will, once they realize how that they can influence and they know how to influence, then I think the conversation will be different.
Yes, I saw an interesting article the other day. I believe it was in the New York Times, and it was precisely about this. There was an educator, and I forget where it was, but they're basically banning their students from using artificial intelligence and AI, and they're even forcing them to use the traditional old-style blue books for doing tests because they don't want them to do anything else. They want them to actually sit and write. And I think the concern was, I think there were a lot of different concerns. I mean, I think it's happening so fast. They really don't know how to control it. So their knee-jerk reaction to controlling it is say, just don't do it right now, rather than embracing it and pulling it into the curriculum. But I think more fundamental, and it was more than literacy and use and understanding how to use artificial intelligence and becoming very literate using it. It was, I think in some cases, they genuinely felt like students were losing the ability to think. Like those real hardcore critical thinking skills, which come up through a classics-based education or even a STEM-based education, to question what you see, ask the right questions, things that you learn from literature, things that you learn from other types of learning, that they were no longer getting that. And that was a big fear. And they wanted to basically instill those skills back into their students to get the most out of I think AI.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier with AI and applying to the disciplines. And I think for the purposes of ensuring that students do have those critical thinking skills, I don't think that the old school methods are a bad idea to install, if that makes sense. But you have to do both, right? You have to make
Right.
sure that students have those
Yes.
critical thinking skills, that they understand, that they know how to write. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, as well as the advent of smartphones, even before AI, these skills are going down. And I can tell
I know.
you that because of my purview of supporting students and families. So my first business started in 2014. So this was when smartphones were kind of not new, but they weren't necessarily as ubiquitous by kids and teens. And as time went on, it became very clear to me that the students were losing. I mean, they weren't the same students, but as a whole, they were losing maturity. They were losing those critical thinking skills. They were losing that ability to reflect. They were losing that ability to write. So unfortunately, this was already happening. So then when you have AI like a shortcut coming in, it's just too tempting for them not to use it because
I
they
know.
haven't even developed these skills in the first place. So I definitely think, I mean, that's a whole other discussion, but I think that like smartphones are, really there's a whole body of work around this, but like smartphones really don't belong
I
in
know.
schools. And
Agree.
it's only relatively recently that that there's been a push to get them out of the schools because they are depleting student learning. I'm talking
And
about K-12 specifically, but this could
yeah.
also apply to higher ed,
100%.
right? So I think that the old school methods, in summary, are a good idea. And as long as you also are not just doing that to avoid AI, that you also have
So
those AI building
Well, you have to
skills.
embrace
I
it. Well, I think it has to be part of anything. Look, the tool's not going away, much like smartphones. You can't ban it outright. I do think they need to be taught how to integrate it properly, like you had said, into the learning process, because it can be a force multiplier if done the right way, but not at the expense of core critical skills that are being lost for a whole slew of reasons. I just feel like the AI tools make it go faster.
And I just
Absolutely.
have to jump in on the smartphone thing and say I'm proud to say that in New York State, where I'm a resident, we actually have, as of this school year, there's a statewide ban on smartphones in schools in K through 12, and it is remarkable the impact it's had already. In fact, I just saw a headline this morning that said cafeterias are noisy again at school, basically saying that students are actually talking to each other, and you can hear the difference. You can hear them actually interacting, whereas before they were probably, holding a smartphone and eating a sandwich or a salad and not interacting as much. So I think it's a good thing. But I'm really curious about something, which is, given what you said, which I think makes a lot of sense, that there was already this, maybe erosion of some of the fundamental skills in the students because of smartphones, because of the COVID pandemic, accelerated by their use of AI. What's the motivation for university administrators to want to integrate AI into their courses? Like I'm not surprised that a first reaction from many institutions would be stop it, block it, keep it out.
Hmm.
But the ones who are saying that they want to proactively embrace and integrate this in, are they doing that because of student demand? Are they doing it because of employability concerns? Or do they have some other intrinsic motivation that they think it's the right thing to do? Can you comment at all on what's motivating them?
Well, my thought is that the motivation is multifold. I think one, they see that students are using it. They want to figure out how they can regulate it in some way and ensure that they have the guidelines for student usage. So I think that's one piece of it. The second piece is the employability piece, because the career ladder is broken right now, so that students and grad students are having trouble getting jobs right out of college, and recent graduates are having trouble finding work, and they are the generation that's been most affected by AI adoption in terms of that employability piece. And then there are also a lot of regulations that have come out both on the state level as well as the federal level that are driving schools and universities to implement AI initiative. So I think it's really a combination of those factors. And the schools I've talked with, even the ones that are a little bit more at the starting line in terms of AI, there's the appetite. I think every school I've talked to, obviously you're talking to me, you have a little bit of an appetite, but even the ones that are just haven't even done anything, they haven't written any policy, they haven't done any coursework. They want to know, what can we do with AI? How should we be implementing AI? So I would say the appetite is fairly universal based on what I've seen, even if the actions are not clearly there. And I think the appetite is really driven by those three things.
That makes sense. How have you seen students embrace shift, or maybe not even their embracing of AI, but maybe their acknowledgement of using it? So I'm going to guess that when you first encountered those students who were using AI to write essays, that they weren't very forthcoming telling you they'd used AI, right? I'm guessing you probably noticed something was going on.
I did, yeah.
Has there been any shift in like what students are willing to admit to and how open they are about their use of the tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it was, I actually wrote about this story in Business Insider. So the first student that I found using AI, I was like so mad. This is before I knew what I was talking about. I was so mad. I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I'm not going to work with you anymore if you use AI. Like I was so upset about it because I wanted him to write. But the truth was, before that happened, like he really wasn't writing much. And so we just helped him to like dial back his usage a little bit so that he could use it to like help him with ideas, but it wasn't like he was just generating like a generic gobbledygook essay, and turning it into me for review, right? So it was really about helping him refine his ideas and get something down. And he did end up producing really great work, and he got into one of the Ivy League schools, so it worked out. But that was like my example of like, this kid like did the wrong thing, but then I'm like, wait, no, actually, like this is helping him. And I kind of like changed my tune like while I was working with him. In terms of students being forthcoming, I would say it just comes up more conversationally, like, oh, I'm using AI to help me, refine this or think about this. But in terms of like citations, there hasn't been, kind of any universal push towards people wanting to cite AI in their work. I do see that a little bit more in the education field, but it seems like the vibe is that you use it, but you don't necessarily disclose it, right? Because what I see is that people do have different attitudes, whether it's fear or just, what
Mhm.
I felt like initially with that student, which is like, hey, you can't use that. Oh, that's not right. You shouldn't do that. So there are different attitudes, whether it's fear or like distaste or embracing of it, that, you almost don't want to disclose because you don't want to make somebody upset that you're using
It's
it.
fine because
So yeah,
there's research that business leaders are having the exact same struggle internally, which is that
yeah,
there's a sense of shame about using it in the workplace, a sense that maybe you're cheating at work somehow. And I have to say, I feel for that student because as you were telling that story, I was remembering that back in the dark ages, when word processors were not at all common, my father was an early adopter of a lot of technology, and he bought a big IBM word processing machine for his office, and I wrote a term paper on it. And I subsequently had to convince my English teacher in high school or middle school even that wasn't actually cheating, that I hadn't actually benefited in some intellectual way by having the computer do my work, that it was literally still my fingers typing on a keyboard. Um,
right.
and my words coming out of my brain. So I think there's always that sort of period of mistrust with any new technology. And certainly they can be abused. There's no doubt.
Well, I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
no, that I think you see that in just regular organizations in general. I mean, so many individuals just use these to, hate to say be lazy, but be lazy. And the tools are such that it facilitates that. It makes it very easy to create work product that's seemingly incredibly professional looking, but isn't really great. And I think it just makes it now it's a lot more of that. And again, like David said, you see that in organizations as well. There's some level of shame with some individuals. I think those that talk about it are talking about it maybe because they're using it the right way. They're much more proactive about learning how to use it and getting the most out of it. But those that hide it, I find that, yeah, they're not using it quite the right way.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I think the culture will shift as these tools become more normal, because what I see as that will be the new normal, is that we are doing human AI collaboration, which maybe we don't need to cite, because ultimately at the end of the day, if you and I entered the same prompt, we're not going to get the same response as we're
Right.
iterating with the AI, or retooling the AI in some way. So it's, it is your product, even if the AI is writing some of the words. And in fact, there was copyright law, I believe, that was passed within the last year that just said that, an AI generated work could be copyrightable. Obviously, if you wrote an article like, what is life? That's not copyrightable. But if you are, collaborating with the AI and you're producing
Right.
something, the copyrightable work. So, yeah,
Which passes the common sense test too, because at that
right.
point, it would be very hard to parse apart which words were AI generated and which words were human, right? Like you start to lose that distinction.
Yeah.
I may be naive in thinking this, and Peter, I'd love to see whether you and Aviva think this is even reasonable, but like I'm starting to hope that employees and maybe students in a university setting will start to police each around around that lazy use of AI. Like I've been hearing stories, and I've actually seen in practice where people start calling out other people who are obviously just phoning it in, using not a collaborative product where it's the human and the AI working together, but literally just asking AI for an answer and copy pasting it into something and passing it off as work. And I think I'm seeing like this bubble of people starting to say, well, that's not right. Like as they realize that there's a different way to do it, they can say, well, I'm doing it the right way, and that person over there is cheating and being lazy. I'm going to start calling them out. Do you think that could happen? Do you think we could ever get people sort of policing each other, or does this have to be more policy driven? I don't know.
I
I
would
don't
just,
know.
yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just challenge your thinking, if you don't mind.
Of
I
course.
think that, I think one way to look at using, I'm sure some people are using it really lazily, like they're turning in just like AI generated work that are not proofreading or whatever. But if you're using AI to like help you develop a slide presentation, or you're using it to, help you refine an email, that's not necessarily lazy, that's strategic, right? And
No,
what we
and I
do
probably
is
explained myself poorly.
we
I endorse what you're describing. That's
yeah, yeah,
100% great. What I'm saying
yeah,
is the people who are using it the right way, are
right,
they going to call out the people who are using it the wrong way once they start understanding there's a right way? Like,
right.
because I do see people doing it entirely lazy, and I see people doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
see the people who do it
wouldn't
the
they
right
be
way getting
lazy without
frustrated.
AI? Wouldn't they be lazy without the AI anyway? Like they would be turning in subpar work. It would just be less voluminous, maybe.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think, look, it's not going to change human nature. Human nature being what
Yeah.
human nature is. If somebody's inherently lazy, they're going to be lazy about using AI. It's just going
Yeah.
to make them create more work and maybe more garbage. So yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I'm not so sure, David. That's
I
actually
think
that's
the
actually a
people
good
who are
point.
doing it the lazy way, though, you said voluminous. I think that's exactly the challenge, right? Is if you were lazy before, you just weren't turning in much work. Now you can show up as someone who produces a lot of content of
Yeah.
low quality work and still be lazy. So, I think like I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were basically saying this person over here is making us all look bad because to the untrained eye, they're suddenly dominating these conversations and contributing more in a meeting than anyone else. But yet when you peel back the layers, you look and you realize it's all low quality junk. But yet the optics are that person's suddenly a high performer.
So I want to pivot a little bit. I mean, there's a million different topics I know we can kind of digress and go off on, but a little more about education. We're all parents, and like my kids are a little bit older, so I had the challenges of having a phone and a phone in class, and the implications on their education, and me constantly telling them to put the phones down. But now with AI, it's so much worse. They have this arguably one of the most powerful tools man has ever created, literally at their fingertips to do anything they want. As a parent, like what kind of recommendations would you make to parents of children going through education, how to most effectively use these tools? Because honestly, even with cell phones, I wouldn't tell a person at the end of the day.
Yeah. So with the tools, you're thinking of AI tools more than like phones and tablets and so on, right?
Yeah, just access to the tools. Yes, 100%.
Yes. So there are some school specific tools out there that I have recommended to districts and to higher education. There's a tool called Boodlebox that I have a relationship with, and other tools that I've heard good things about that I haven't used, like School AI and Magic School. So these are tools that are FERPA compliant, and FERPA is a privacy law. Essentially, the tool isn't going to divulge personal information, and it has specific guardrails to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I think one of the first things that a younger grade school could do, a K-12 school, would be just to adopt a tool to start getting students, teachers, administrators practicing using AI in a safe playground. So that would be what I would say first, is that schools could adopt a tool. And some of these tools, because they're relatively new, you can get a pretty good deal on them, because you want adoption. Like, as a technology company, you want adoption, right? So you want to give away some things so that people start using it. If people like it, they will pay for it, right? So that would be my recommendation to schools, would be to just try to adopt a tool, because then you're guaranteed and assured that those conversations that are assignment related, you can set a norm. Any assignment related AI use needs to be in our tool. And this allows also for auditing and so on. Obviously we don't want to like be surveilling like other activities that are not school assignments, but that provides a really nice playground for students to learn AI, as well as benefit from using AI in a relatively controlled environment. So that's what I would say is to parents, to advocate for that, for the schools, that the school adopts tools that are safe, so that students aren't playing with these like companion things, and Meta has stuff, and there's just so many landmines for parents, right, to navigate. I mean, my kids are 8 and 4, so I still have a lot of influence over them. But as they get older, it's just harder and harder to regulate, like, what are they going to use and how are they going to use it? And so
Right.
I think schools can really be in a good position to guide that responsible use. And I do think, while, China K-12 might be a little early to learn how to use AI, I don't think necessarily it's too early to advocate how do you use these devices responsibly, appropriately,
Right.
and teaching that in an age appropriate way. I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
And what do you tell the
As
parents that have to deal with this on a regular basis?
Oh my gosh, my hearts go out to you. It's so hard. I mean,
I
yeah,
know.
like I said, I'm fortunate because I used to have my kids using iPads more than they did, and I decided, this is not a good idea. I'm gonna take them away. I took them away. It was like maybe a day of like, and then it's like, okay, they're fine. They don't need them. They don't need them. But it's a lot harder when they're older. And I've talked to this about other parents, that you have to, a lot of times as a parent of an older child, you have to kind of like change your own behavior to get them to change their behavior. So you have to you have to set as
Hmm.
a family your own limitations. So if it's devices down at 10 o'clock, that means everybody in the house has to do
Yes.
that. If you
kids are
shut off the
remarkably good
internet,
at
it needs to be for everybody in the house, right? So I think that's the best way to support kids and teens, is like, you have to be the change that you want to see in your child. You can't have one set of rules for parents and one set of rules for the kids. And then there are different apps that parents can use to monitor their child's use. I know they're not perfect, but I've heard good things about Bark. I haven't used it, but I've heard good things about Bark. Getting your kids a dumb phone. I'm thinking about getting he'll be in 3rd grade next. I'm thinking
Flip
about getting
phone.
him a dumb phone, flip phone, because he will go to an after school program and he's allowed to walk home. So I'm thinking about getting him a dumb phone, but I would not get him a smartphone. So, though I don't know if that helps, but those are just some
No,
thoughts.
it's interesting because I generally ask because I want to know. But look, my kid's a little bit older, so it's a little bit different for me. But
Hmm.
I see the challenges, and I remember the challenges I confronted when we were giving them phones. And what do you do? And there's the peer pressures, there's this, there's that. And as a parent, there's no rule book on how do you deal with this on a regular basis. And a phone was one device. AI takes it to a whole nother level, but used well with a parent guidance, I think can be a real multiplier in their education. But how do you do that? That's the hard part, I think. I don't think there's any answers here.
I
So,
like your point about sort of leading by example, because kids are remarkably adept at calling out hypocrisy when they think that there's a set of rules for the kids and the parents have different rules, right? So like, you're right. I think you need to model that good behavior for kids, which implies that parents need to also be learning. They don't have a school teaching them how to use AI, but they probably need to be teaching themselves, or somehow getting a better understanding of the skills they need and the thinking and the frameworks about how to use AI effectively. Because we know from every other thing that's ever happened in the world that you can't just outsource teaching those values to the school. Like, the parents have to be part of that process too. So it seems like parents have to get educated as much as the students.
Absolutely. And it's so hard to unplug from devices. So I'm not here to say I'm better than anybody else, but just if we want, especially older kids, just as I've dealt with, so I've had teenagers for so many years, even though I've never parented them, just having worked with them for all these years, just seeing how they respond to their parents, and which
Never
kids are
will.
sort of like more, have a good relationship with their parents, and which kids don't. These are just some of the
Right.
things that I see.
So if you were to project out a couple of years, knowing where we are today in the use of AI in education and just in organizations in general, where do you see things trending? I'd love to put that, I'm looking ahead in the future, Peter. This is what I see happening, knowing what I know today.
Can you elaborate on what you mean in terms of the future? So are we talking about like what
How,
education will look like,
what
or
education, let's narrow it down. What education will look like. I think that's actually a great place to start.
what education will look like, do you think, for K-12 or higher ed, or both?
Higher ed, both.
Okay. So I think that that higher ed is going to be the first to change, and K-12 will be second, because I think, the schools have a lot more control on the K-12 level of student behavior, student norms. They're honestly going to be able to use AI in class. Most assignments are not on a learning management system like a Blackboard or Canvas or something like that. So I do think AI in education is filtering down to the K-12 level in terms of teachers. So recently there was a large grant that was given to the American Federation of Teachers to do AI training for teachers, and I think that's a really positive thing, because teachers have a huge instructional burden. I know I'm married to a teacher. My mom was a teacher, so I'm not a teacher, but I have a window into that world, probably more so than most people. And there is a lot that goes into teaching, besides
Yes.
just showing up, right? So I think it's helpful for teachers to have these tools to improve their lesson plans, and also to reduce the work burden that they have outside of the classroom. So all for that. So I think the teachers will be leading the charge in terms of innovating in K-12, and then it will filter to different levels. And then if you have a forward-thinking administrator, perhaps they'll adopt some tools. And again, I would recommend that for every K-12 district, if you can afford to adopt a tool to start giving the kids some fundamental skills and a few assignments exposure, that would be great. On the higher ed level, I know we talked about this earlier. I see community colleges as really being the engines of uh, upward mobility in the future, because the world is moving really fast. And so students and working professionals are going to need micro-credentials to upskill and level up their careers in this new AI-driven world. And I think community colleges are best positioned to do that, because they tend to be the most affordable and the most local. And then the college in three model that I mentioned before, I think, is a model that I'm hoping that more institutions adopt, where you can get a bachelor's degree in less time, so that you can get more working experience, and also not have the additional financial burden, right? Because college is expensive. So it will also reduce the
You
cost
can't
of
really
college.
believe that, though. Like, I've got to believe that universities are going to find a way to charge you the same thing for a 3-year bachelor's degree that they charge for a 4.
Right. Well, you
They're
just
going to
look at
get their
the
pound of
curve.
flesh.
The curve is like the steepest roller coaster you've ever ridden in terms of the college costs and how they've gone up
Oh,
over
I
the
know.
years. So
Oh, I'm well
it's a
aware.
it's an issue for sure.
Do,
Yeah.
do you see hyper-personalization of education? Because I think every student is genuinely very unique. And, you're teaching 40 kids or 30 kids in the class. You're obviously not going to personalize the lesson plan to every individual student. But I
Mhm.
believe the tools actually give you that level of personalization, a capability at least.
I love the idea of hyper personalization. I don't know how close we are to that. That level of differentiation. I really like the idea of hyper personalization, especially when it comes to special education students. I have seen, and I haven't tried out these products, but I have seen that there have been products on the market that are targeted specifically to special ed teachers and students to improve that individuation of learning.
Right.
And then on the higher ed level, I've been speaking with colleges that do have these sort of built-in tutors within their LMS platform. So if you have a question about instructional material or assignments, that you have that, and I do really like that. So I don't know how close we are to ubiquity in that, but I definitely see pockets of innovation that gives me hope that we could drive towards more personalized learning. And the challenging part is just making that personalization robust enough where you can't replicate that with an LLM, and it's hard to do that. The tools are still new and developing, and so I can't comment on the quality of these personalized learning experiences. How personalized are they, in what ways? But there certainly are. There's also this whole assessment piece. I was speaking with someone yesterday who has a kind of an essay feedback assessment platform that helps professors to not necessarily detect AI usage, but just to use AI to give different types of feedback and check essays to give more nuanced feedback. So there are a lot of there's a lot of innovation happening, but it's still really the Wild West. So I really think
Hmm.
we're 10 years out from a hyper-personalized learning experience. I think first will come more
Interesting.
of these innovations of credentialing and hopefully shorter bachelor's degrees too, because the demand, people are still enrolling in college, but as the labor market shifts rapidly, I think you'll see that demand decreasing over
I
the
think
next years.
your point about micro credentials is really, really interesting. And it's funny because there is clearly a gap there, and that gap is not being filled currently from where I sit by educational institutions. It's being filled by for-profit companies and other companies, right? So if you look at in a lot of companies that we work with, there are people who go out and take the Microsoft i900 course if they're a Microsoft shop, or they'll take the Google Intro to AI course, and they have they're basically getting the equivalent of credential-less micro-credentials by going out and doing these curriculums. And, they can be on all sorts of different platforms, some for profit, some created by the software vendors, etc. So I like the idea of, especially the community colleges, sort of stepping into that space and providing some maybe more standardization and more validation around what these micro-credentials really mean. I have to say, if I were a professor today, and I'm obviously not, but if I were, I would be hard at work right now in creating a digital twin of myself so that I could offer one-on-one interactive counseling and support and tutorial sessions to every one of my students. Because, office hours are obviously an important thing, and yet there are never enough office hours for a professor. And imagine that you could make yourself available 24/7 to all of your students. And you had a digital twin that was trained on everything you'd ever written and published and said in a classroom. Could be immensely powerful.
Absolutely. There is a company that I'm sure there's more than one, but I did try one out and I was not impressed. I'm not going to say what the company was because I don't want to badmouth anybody, but again, this is just one experience, but I'm like, it's just not there yet. I don't know. It's like, it's a great idea, but it just, the reality of the implementation, I haven't seen work very well.
No, I think as the technology matures, we'll get better and better at it. I'm really curious, though. You also mentioned the tools that are set up to give feedback on essays and other things. And one of the things I was thinking as we're talking about universities is, hypothetically, if you had to do your dissertation again, would you rather be evaluated by a potentially biased and highly flawed human, or by an advanced AI model that had expertise in your field of research?
Oh my gosh,
And
this is
why?
such a loaded question because I never want to do my dissertation again. It was so hard. I'm so happy I don't have to do it. I wish I had AI to help me with my research back in the day, but unfortunately I did not. No, I mean, I still really value, I think, we touched on it earlier about these kind of human skills that are not replaceable with AI, and we talked about critical thinking. And I think, the relationship piece is also a big part of making that feedback resonate because I know that when I talk to AI, it's like, you kind of don't trust it all the way. And if you have a relationship with someone, you trust them and they're giving you feedback, that feedback is going to be a lot more meaningful than the feedback you get from an AI. Even if the feedback is correct, it may not resonate as deeply. So I personally would still choose the human, but I would want to use AI somehow in my dissertation to support the data analysis. I would have done probably a quantitative, because I am not a STEM trained person. And now I feel like I am a STEM person because I can just use AI to help me with the stuff I'm like, don't feel like I'm as good at naturally. So now I can be like the magic data cruncher. I can like plug in all these methods and I don't have to worry about like, looking line by line on things. But yeah, I mean, I would have loved to do my dissertation now, but I would say yes, I would still prefer the human to give me feedback, even if I myself would have preferred to use AI to support dissertation research.
One of the interesting things about human feedback is, as you were saying this, I was thinking about the fact that a human can also read your body language, and they might, if they're giving you a bit of feedback, and they might decide based on your body language or your facial expression that you don't really believe them yet, or you don't get it. And they could decide to double down on a point. They could try to find a different way to explain the same point to you, right? AI can't do that. AI is going to give you feedback in one shot, and it's not going to say, you don't seem to believe me, Aviva, or I don't think you get this part. Let me try to explain that a different way. Because it just doesn't have a sense to judge your reaction to the feedback. So that's hugely powerful. To me, it feels like that is a very powerful part of that learning cycle, that sort of back and forth debate and whatnot that occurs as you start getting into maybe points of creative disagreement, for example.
Absolutely. I have to say I experimented with a prompt in ChatGPT. Someone posted, I turned AI into a coach and here's the prompt I use. And basically the prompt was something of the fact of like, be harsh all the time and give me feedback, show me what I'm missing. And I was like, oh, I'm just pissed at this thing, like I don't want it to, I want it to be nice again. So
Yes.
I just changed it back to being nice, because like I don't want to be talked down to by an AI,
There's
like it's
there's a
like,
lot
no
of bad
thank you.
information out there.
I'm
There's a lot
like,
of bad
I'm
advice.
like, I'm like, maybe that, no, but some people might find that very motivating. That's all very motivating of like, wait, this is what you're missing. But for me, I'm like, no,
This
I want a safe space to express my ideas. And if I have questions, I will ask. I don't want to be
right.
talked down to by this AI. So
There's a lot of bad advice out there when it comes to artificial intelligence.
yeah,
The
for
vast majority of what
sure.
I see written and on TV is woefully, well, I should say, very inaccurate.
Exactly. But I'm always up for an experimentation. So
So
yeah.
I got a bit of a loaded question, and it actually comes, I think, from our conversation when we spoke before we obviously for today. Because the nature of work is clearly going to change because of these tools, and it's going to change quite dramatically. And I think it remains to be seen what it's ultimately going to look like. Certainly different than today, and I think it's going to affect everybody differently. Anything from the trades all the way through educators and scientists and researchers. But I think it's going to have a profound impact. So, if you had to give an advice to a parent on their kid's future and what to go into, what would you tell them today in order to future-proof their ability to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, obviously it depends on first of all, it depends on the child and their interests, or the teen and their interests, before I would guide them towards one specific path, because, I'm very into like holistic guidance because of what, my background and everything. But I guess I would push them in one of two directions. One would be either doing a very human-centered job. That could be anything from a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, an electrician, something that requires you to go in person with other people to do some kind of service, whether that's anything from medical to education to trades. So that's one pathway, which is like obviously very many pathways in that. Or I would advise them to do something that they could combine AI with a discipline of interest, whether it's biology or education or something like that, where they have both that expert knowledge as well as sort of this, AI fluency, as we talked about it. So those are kind of the two pathways I would recommend. And then ideally, if the teen likes it, they would do one of these things on the human side, and they would build those AI skills too. That's the most future proof, in my opinion, rather than, because these AI models are already smarter than most of us and will be smarter than everybody soon enough. I think Sam Altman
Yes.
said 5 is smarter than him. I don't know if that's true or not, but sometimes I think it's not too smart, but it just depends on,
Well, I
your
agree with you. I
vantage
don't know
point.
if it's, yeah.
I don't think it's too smart sometimes. Sometimes it is smart, but sometimes it's not. But in any case, I think that, we just need to know how to apply knowledge in a human domain. And I would really, if my child is coming to me and asking me for advice, I would say try a human domain, but also learn that AI knowledge.
So I'm curious, like, I want to talk about these human domains because there's the aspect of like a human has to be there to physically do something.
Hmm.
I don't think we're safe from that for very long because
Hmm.
advances in robotics are happening almost as quickly as advances in AI computation. And so I think, we're going to see very soon that a lot of, manual labor and other jobs that require skilled humans maybe don't actually require humans to be there as much as we had assumed.
Right.
What are those intrinsic capabilities in your mind that are still purely human, right? Like we talked about things like judgment and wisdom, if we can even define what that is. I don't know. What would you say are those like capabilities that are the most resistant to being AIified
Yeah.
away?
It's relationship building, critical thinking, and nuanced communication. So I would say, yes, you can make AI context aware, but context can shift. And I know I understand what you're saying about the humanoid robots coming, but I mean, me personally, I do not want to have a robot electrician in my house. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that way, right? Where like I would prefer to have somebody who has, I mean, I don't care if it's the best electrician in the world, unless it costs me like $10 or something. I mean, maybe I would try it, but they might burn down my house, and then who's going to be accountable for that, right? So, yeah, I think we're even if the technology is there, I think the road to adoption for humanoid robots is going to be a lot longer because
So we won't see you jumping into a self-driving taxi anytime in the near future, I bet.
No, no, I'm
I'm
against
with you on
self-driving
that.
taxis. I won't do agentic browsers either or humanoid robots in my house. It's just certain things you're like, this could really go wrong, and there's not any kind of
Don't
recourse
disagree.
when you have a machine that's has that level of responsibility and autonomy. So I just don't trust it, but other
I don't
people may
disagree
feel
with you.
differently.
I
Yeah,
completely agree with you. Same
yeah,
sentiment here.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
But your
Ellie.
point about nuanced communication is really, really interesting. And I think, it's almost, I almost want to shorthand it to say, you're right. AI can never read the room.
Yeah, yeah.
And then again, a lot of people can't either, but AI certainly isn't going to read the room and adapt on the fly to changing personal dynamics. That's a great point.
Hmm.
Well,
Really interesting.
yeah.
I have my maybe last, I don't know, we keep thinking of other things to talk about, but I'm just curious. You obviously are very inquisitive. You've been out using a lot of different tools, not agentic browsers, which I also endorse that decision. Although I do use them just for pure experimentation and play with, but yeah, I wouldn't be daily driving them anytime soon. Uh, what have you stumbled across in the last few weeks or months that has been the most useful or interesting thing? Is there anything that jumps out at you as like, wow, this is a great tool. I've really, benefited from this.
Yeah, I would say no new developments. Claude Code is very interesting. I've tried
Yeah.
working with it, but it's like it's almost like it almost overcomplicates things, I would say, because I like was like, well, let me like try using it, and then it just I don't know, I can't get it to fire quite the way I wanted to. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna go back to like more manual AI usage because this isn't like quite working. But I would say that's interesting. I think I definitely need to explore Claude Code more because I've been realizing more and more that it's not just coding, that you can do a lot of other stuff with it. But I'm very
Yes.
happy with Cassidy, which is what I use to build agents on. So that's a tool I've been using for about 6 months that I've built all of my agents on that I love. And then I just alternate between Claude and ChatGPT depending on the task. I love Claude's feature of looking. I mean, you can do this in ChatGPT, but I think Claude does a great job, like looking through your emails and like summarizing conversations and things like that. So I found all of those kind of applications very useful in day to day. But like again, nothing like super new. But I would say those are the three tools that I use most frequently: are Cassidy, Claude, and ChatGPT.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I use Claude Code and Claude quite extensively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to
I,
confess I have never used Cassidy, but I'm curious now to check it out and see how it compares to some of the other agentic tools out there. So thank you for
Well,
sharing
I'm
that.
happy to send you, and if you want to share it with your listeners too, a link to try it. If you use my code, it gives you some credits to play around with it and make agents. And what's cool about it is that you can prompt engineer an agent, so you don't have to like manually pick the things.
Okay,
You
yeah,
can
no,
prompt
definitely.
engineer an agent, and you can connect it with different applications as well, like Zapier, and then from there anything
Interesting,
else.
interesting.
So yeah.
Very cool.
Well,
Very
this has
cool.
been, I'd say, an interesting discussion.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
This has been a fascinating discussion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Likewise,
it's
I really
great
enjoyed
to have a chance to, and it's great to have a chance to talk to an expert. Like Peter and I love talking about and thinking about what this means for education, but we really value having someone who actually is working in the field and has expertise to sort of share your thoughts with us. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This has been fantastic. Thank you. And it's funny because I'm looking, we had a list of questions here and we got through very little of them. And I know if we, there's far deeper, some of these questions are really a podcast in and of themselves. I would love to have you back in the future. Again, this was a fantastic conversation. It was certainly educational for me. And I love walking away and speaking to people like yourself too. And I love this thing. I learned something. To me, that's like the criteria. And I walk away and I could say I learned something. I'm great. And I learned a lot today. So thank you again. This was a wonderful experience.
Thank you both. Great to be here. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time on Call Me Data. Bye, guys.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us over on YouTube. And make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well.